sort of 19 the first time you shot someone? Is that the...
Exactly, yes. It's the first time I shot somebody and killed somebody. So I killed one and wounded two.
The I Catch Killers podcast was a fresh start for me, as I left policing behind and started a new life. Over the years, we've laughed together, cried, and shared some powerful moments. Welcome to I Catch Killers.
Welcome to another episode of I Catch Killers. I first became aware of today's guest back in 1993 when I read his book about a British SAS mission that he led during the Gulf War called Bravo 20. That book was a worldwide #1 bestseller. I followed that up by reading another book that he had written called Immediate Action, about his life in the SAS. Today's guest, Andy McNab's life, is as fascinating as the numerous books he has written. And today we're going to talk to him about his life, his career in the army, and life outside the military. Like a lot of our guests on I Catch Killers, Andy's life started out on the wrong side of the law. As a teenager, he was arrested for petty crimes and ended up in the military from there. We are going to talk about what it's like being an elite soldier, how he dealt with being captured and tortured during the war, the importance of literacy, and we're even going to discuss psychopaths. I think it's fair to say that Andy, which I should point out is a pseudonym pen name, may be one of the world's most well-known Special Forces soldiers and authors. And guess what? I never thought I'd have the opportunity to sit down and talk with Andy McNab. Andy McNab, welcome to I Catch Killers.
Hiya. Good to be here.
Well, I probably should clarify the title of the podcast, I Catch Killers. Now, it's not reference to what you've done. That's paying homage to the fact that I was a homicide detective in the cops for 34 years. So that's where the name comes from, I Catch Killers. So
gotcha.
I've scared a few people that have come on that have been on the other side of the law when they come on to I Catch Killers and they're going, what the hell? What's this about?
Yeah. I remember you.
Yeah. I never caution them before I start. Also, can we just explain why your face is blacked out? And I know, but just for the sake of the listeners.
Yeah, basically, during my time in the Special Air Service, I got pulled out for a couple of years to become an undercover operator in Northern Ireland. Working undercover for 2 years, me and another fella out of the Special Air Service, working in Derry. It was a second city in Northern Ireland. And basically we were trying to find and work out what was going on with what we call ASUs, active service units of different terrorist organizations. Yeah. So show my face potentially puts at risk. And obviously we've done a lot with the Northern Ireland Special Branch, and you got people there who are still living there who were operating, with their family, just being sensible.
No, I fully understand. Thanks for explaining that. Now, I've spent the weekend reading your latest book, The Rescue, which is about a 2012 hostage rescue in northern Afghanistan. I got to say, it's a cracker of a read. So well done.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, based on a true story, as I understand it, but certain things, names and methodologies just changed to protect people. But it gives a real insight in the world of special forces.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you enjoyed it. But what I've been trying to do is right now, in the way that we've now, because of streamers like Netflix and Paramount, where they do a lot of these docudramas. So you're looking at real life facts, but actually you're going places in those docudramas that you don't actually know about. But you've got an idea of what was going on. So. Trying to go with the bandits who capture the four women from the NGO, going to the Taliban who want to capture the four women from the bandits because it's all about money and power. Even going to the intelligence service and the CIA who first heard of this kidnapping, and even going to the UK government who finally give the go or the no go on these jobs. Because when we tend to watch or read about these, it's always about the tip of the spear stuff that goes on. What I was trying to do is expand it and show you all of the different elements that make it up so they can get in and go and do the job.
It had a real feel of a realism about all the different players and all the different stakeholders. And you're quite right, from a public's point of view, we see the tip of the spear and go, oh, that's what it was all about. But there's so many other layers. And I want to talk in depth about that later. But I also want to just make a comment. Like, I first became aware of you on the back of Bravo 20, and that's I think I read that book. When was that? 93, so 30 or so years ago.
Yeah.
The book came out. Loved the book, and I followed that up with Immediate Action, your sort of memoir and the life of your life in the SAS. And I got to say, outside of the where the SAS got a lot of exposure with that embassy rescue in when was that? Not in the 1980s in London. It was first time people got a real insight into a world that we'd heard about, but didn't really have an understanding of.
Yeah, I think there was a big cultural change at the time, and certainly the experience with the British Army, even going back to the First World War, where you had enlisted soldiers, people like myself, sort of privates and junior and senior NCOs, weren't allowed to keep diaries. And obviously in the First World War, there was a huge proportion of people that didn't have the numeracy and literacy to write their experiences. So it tended to be from the officer class who would be writing memoirs and of course poetry, and that sort of went on. And what Bravo 20 hit was exactly at the same time when 24-hour news was really getting a hold on the West, and there was a movement where people they just don't want to know about what was going on, say in the headquarters of something, or what was going on in government. They want to know about what was going on for the people who were carrying out those actions that have been passed down, because that's what they're getting now, because there was this constant need for news. So even during the Gulf War, this 24-hour cycle was starting to show a lot more of the personal stories of the men and women that were on the ground, as opposed to the bigger picture. Not only that, but obviously these personal stories and what was going on the ground. So it was a sort of that at that time when there was that movement where people wanted to know what was going on.
Yeah, well, I think into today's day and age, and we're going back quite some time then, but even today, that the public want to know what's going on. Gone are the days that they can be drip fed. This is the sort of sanitized version, and let's have a look behind the curtain, what actually goes on in these operations. And so that I'd like to talk about. I'd like to talk about that mission and that particular and the book that came from that mission. If you're happy to tell us about that. It was during the first Gulf War.
So by then, I'd served 8 years in the infantry, 7 years in Special Air Service. When you join the what we call UKSF, United Kingdom Special Forces, no matter what rank you are, you lose your rank and you start again as a trooper, private soldier. So by then I was the troop sergeant of the Air Assault Troop that I originally joined 7 years beforehand, and our job. I know in films and all this, it's the mission and it's all that sort of stuff, but actually the way that people talk about it, they're just called jobs. So our job was to go to northwest of Baghdad to try and find a fibre optic cable that ran from the command centres in Baghdad into the western deserts that were giving information for the Scud teams that moment were firing into Israel. They're falling on places like Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
And there was the agreement that was struck with the Americans was that Israel would not join the war if the Scuds stopped firing within 14 days. If not, Israel would join the war. That's what the Iraqis wanted, because the alliance with the Arab nations against Iraq to liberate Kuwait would have crumbled. So all of our planning preparation for other jobs all cancelled. Everybody, the whole regiment was out trying to look for these Scuds. Right. We went up to the northwest of Baghdad to try and find a fibre optic cable. And we didn't know where it was. We didn't know what to do when we got there. Blow it up, headbutt it. We really weren't too sure. But the whole basis of SF, any SF from any country, is you've got to work on minimal information, because otherwise you don't need special forces. So we got up there, and in fact we never found it. There was a lot more Iraqi military activity than we were told. There was a whole Iraqi armoured brigade coming down from the border with Iran, which, because they'd been fighting a war with Iran for 10 years, they were coming down south to eventually get to Kuwait, I suppose, to start defending Kuwait. The ground war hadn't started by now. And we were compromised by a young kid, a young boy, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old with goats. Basically, we get out of our hide position because we were hiding out in the day, getting out at night, trying to find this fiber optic cable. So we had to get out from our hide because we were too bunched up. So we get out on the desert plain. And that's, in fact, then that's what initiated a series of contacts, firefights called contacts. And eventually, there's no way we're going to get to Saudi going south. So we had to put in our E&E plan, escape and evasion plan, which meant going to the American or the British embassies in Syria, which was the nearest country of safety. So on the way there, we got within a couple of kilometers of the border. On the way there, 3 were killed, 4 were captured, myself included, all at different times around the border. And only one of the patrol eventually made it across the border and eventually to the British embassy. So, and then they got him back to Cyprus.
That was a team of 8 that you led in that. So it's going behind enemy lines for the job that you had to look for those optic fibre cables. And you know, I love it when blokes like yourself talk about a job like that or a mission, and it's done in such a practical, matter-of-fact way. But when you were compromised and the firefights that you became involved in and trying to get across to Syria, you're looking at over 100 kilometres or whatever. You had to try and get across that far for your escape and evasion.
Yeah, it was. It was about 148 kilometres. And we had, it's a really sort of crazy, we was up in the northwest, and people think of the desert as being desert, but in fact it's not. It's like lots of rocky shell, so we're all getting sort of smashed up on that. And as we're moving through, we had some really bad weather. In the south, near Kuwait, the invasion was halted for a while because the weather was so bad. In the desert, that obviously track vehicles, it would be hard for them to move. Where we were, we started to have snow, and we had people starting to suffer from cold injuries. We're trying to fight our way through. We got to the point actually where we broke an SOP, a standard operating procedure. So obviously at night time, our biggest weapon is concealment. It's not the weapons we got; it's concealment. But we got a brew on because one of the lads was really starting to suffer with cold injuries, and he was going to go down with hypothermia and die. So what we had to do was sort of dig out a bit of a tank berm. These big sort of ditches, in fact, that are built for tanks. So you can just see the holes just sticking out. Dig out on the tank berm and get a burner in there and trying to get some hot liquid down and trying to keep him alive for us to keep on moving. So we're getting contacted. By then, the air war started, and we heard, we assumed were our jets. We weren't too sure. We heard loads of fast jets overhead now, and then you could hear the bombing in the distance. Yeah. So we knew now the ground war had started. And we eventually got about, I don't know, maybe about 15 kilometres from the border, and it was very clear that we're not going to get across if we have another couple of nights in Iraq. Yeah. So we decided to hijack a vehicle. And what we've been seeing coming from what we call the MSR, the main supply route, coming out from the northwest, which would go up towards Syria, we'd see all these, Hilux 4-wheel drive sort of vehicles moving around. So we waited until last light. The lad who was going down with hypothermia, who we managed to sort of keep him alive. I got him up on the road. We got rid of all their kit and their weapons, got him up on the road as if he was injured, and waved down the lights as they come towards us, hoping it was going to be a Hilux so we can go cross country, but it weren't. It was like an old 1950s taxi, from New York, a yellow taxi. So we had to get the lads out of there. There were 2 militia in the back, and the taxi driver. Taxi driver was totally freaking out, of course, and he's going, "I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian. Shoot them. They're the Muslims." All that sort of stuff going on. Get them out, get them in the ditch, and then we headed towards the Syrian border, and then we got caught in a vehicle checkpoint. and we had to initiate contact to get out. And that's when it started to go a bit mad.
Yeah.
Where we're all sort of getting fragmented from the patrol as we sort of fought those last sort of few kilometres to the border. And that's the guy I went down with quite firmly. A guy, it was a Swiss-Italian guy, Consiglio, who came from the Royal Marines. Literally, he was a lad up in front of me. He had it's like called a Minimi. It's a small 5.56 millimeter machine gun.
Yeah.
Had about 25 rounds left. And his job, he's up the front. I'm behind him. He just lets off with the rounds. That gives us time to sort of move out and trying to, take on whatever's having a go at us. Literally run out of ammunition. He got shot, and then it initiated lots and lots of contacts on the way to the border. So I landed up at the border on my own, but it was becoming first light, and I didn't want to cross the border at first light because the border's a political border. It's not a social border at all, or an emotional border. And there's, in fact, a few kilometres away, there was a small town called Al Qaim, which straddled the border. So it's all about getting across the border and making as much distance as possible, using the whole of the following night. So I got in a drainage culvert. And I was feeling quite confident, actually. There was lots of noise and, lots of activity going on, gunshots everywhere during the day. And I got to about sort of 4:30. And in that part of the world, 6 it's light, 6 it's dark. It's a regular sort of occurrence. So I had about an hour and a half to go. And I thought, great, I can get over the border and then start making distance. I got all night. But vehicles came over the drainage culvert that I was hiding in the fields by on the banks of Euphrates. And this time they stopped, lads jumping out. They started to fire around the culvert. Clearly, I've been seen somehow. I have no idea, but they knew I was there. They wanted me out. I weren't getting out because, a lot of lads, when they're getting excited, you stand a good chance of getting shot for excitement rather than anything else.
Yeah.
So I'm just waiting for the lads. So they dragged us out. And the military got great terms for things. So there's one of the terms is tactical questioning. Tactical questioning just means you basically just get beaten up, you get filled in. And that's when I started to have some damage to my jaw and my teeth. And then another member of the patrol I met in Al Qaim before we got sent to Baghdad to the interrogation centre.
Andy, I'd just like to ask, to get someone that's actually experienced that, I think that would be probably a lot of people's worst nightmares, to find yourself in a situation like that, captured in a war of that nature, a special forces soldier, and taken by enemy combatants. What was going through your mind?
Well, do you know what? I think at first it was initially when they were, when the Iraqis were all jumping out of the vehicles, I thought, well, so far so good. Do they know I'm here? What's going on? I just sort of keep tight and see what happens. Then the firing started, and it was the concern about that. Again, might end up getting shot purely out of excitement, not people being out of control. And then what there was a sense of failure, of personal failure.
Yep.
Because as I got brought out of the culvert, I was literally less than 2 kilometres away from the border, and Syria, there was lots of high ground on the other side of the border. And as I got dragged out, I could see that, now it's daylight still, I could see the high ground of Syria. So there was this feeling of failure. I thought, right, well, I'm cool. And then what happens, it's not as mechanical as this, but what happens is that once you're captured, you've still got a job to do. And it's not about, like Queen and Country and all that sort of rubbish. That's all for TV and films. What you've got, it's a thing called conduct under capture. And you train for this as well. All countries have got interrogation centres. So the people who interrogate people practice on, SF soldiers, and we use their sort of skills. So we get practice. But the reason why you have conduct under capture is because what you've got to do is give a window of opportunity for your headquarter element to work out. They haven't heard anything from what we call SITREPs, our situation reports. They haven't heard anything from Bravo 20, and that just means the 2nd Patrol B Squadron. That's all that means. And Bravo 20, we haven't heard anything. So what do they know? So they got to assume everybody's been captured and everybody's saying everything that they know. And that's one of the reasons why when you go start preparing for a job, you go into isolation. So you don't know what other people are doing and they don't know what you are doing. So
okay.
that way...
I understand what you're saying there. That's quite interesting. So if you are captured, you haven't got any relevant information because you don't know. And we're talking what's happening on the ground at the time, something that the enemy would find valuable. You haven't really got access to that information.
No, and it all stems from that planning and preparation where it's called need to know. So you only need to know what you need to know to carry out your job. So, and literally you're in isolation. So when you get a job, you go into isolation as a patrol. If you want any information, as the information, it comes to you. You don't go out and get it.
Yeah.
So nobody knows what's going on. So, and the reason that it works, again, it's not for old black and white films, because we don't fight wars of sovereignty anymore. We're not worried about our back gardens being invaded. But what it does is, because even on a good day, you're looking at what we call a regiment rather than special air service in the sort of military parlance. On a good day, about 400 people, say. So you know people, their kids, their wives, and their all that sort of stuff. So what there's a personal point of you continually carrying out your conduct under capture, because you've got to give them a window as long as possible as you possibly can, so that the headquarter element go, right, this is what they know, what do we need to cancel and what do we need to change? Okay, and that's all about saving your mates' lives.
What I understand you're saying there, it's about you holding out in your circumstances. So command can, if there's anything that you might pass on if you're at the extreme, being tortured, that they can make the appropriate plans to deal with that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then, so what you have cover stories. So you first of all you break into the Geneva Convention, number, rank, name, date of birth. And it's really weird because on your dog tags you have religion, but Geneva Convention means you don't have to say that, but you got it on your dog tag. So there's a bit of confusion. I know it's all crazy, isn't it? So you go into your number, rank, name, date of birth. So what the Iraqis wanted us to say was that we were Israelis. So again, because we weren't dressed like what we call the Green Army, because you wear your own stuff, do your own thing. So that didn't help. And also the guy I just spoke about, Bob Consiglio, was this Swiss Italian, really tight curly hair, dark skin. And what we didn't realize at the time, he had no foreskin. So he really fit the profile of an Israeli. So the cover story. So at your own point during the interrogation in Baghdad, everybody would then break into their cover stories at different times whenever they thought it was the right time. Because those sort of things you can't govern. You can't say 5 days, 4 days, because you've got no control of that. So then you break into your cover story, and our cover stories were that we came from our original units, so we've got reality and truth in that, and we can talk about that. And we were all medics, which we are, so we're all medical trained, and we are part of a search and rescue team that was out to try and get shot down pilots, Allied pilots. So, and you keep to that story, you just keep on with that story, because there's so much truth to talk about in that.
That's the plan that you go in with. But when the torture starts, when you've been bashed and all that, can you, and I suppose everyone handles situations differently, but talking about your experience there, did at any point you feel like you just got to give up on it and just whatever it'll take, just stop the beating? Does that type of thing go through your mind? Because I'm just trying to get a sense of it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think obviously we've had sort of, we've been brought up on stories of heroism when we're fighting these big sort of wars of national consequence. Second World War. We saw what happened in Vietnam, where there was, if you like, a process. But then people were coming back, prisoners who were getting persecuted, in some cases prosecuted for their actions that were going on. So the process, by the time we were caught, was more on an emotional level rather than a national, we're the good guys level. And that personal level is all about the other people that are out on the ground. And the system, it does work, because there's also another attitude of I'm not. What's the score on profanity? Can I use profanity on this?
Yeah, you're allowed. I give you permission.
I've only got one.
Okay.
So there's an attitude which is a thing that everybody says. Ultimately, fuck it. You got no control. Fuck it. And the thing comes from that is the regiment say, look, lads, you volunteer for this. No one's making you do it. If you don't like it, you can get out. There's thousands of people who want to take your place. So when you get into those situations, it really is like, fuck it. And what happens is that there's a sense of almost relief, because, in sort of all of our cultures, if something happens, we always blame it on someone else. We've all got shoulders like, I don't know, Coca-Cola bottles, we're all getting it away. But actually, in those situations, well, you're caught. That's it. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, it's like, fuck it. And then there's, it's, not total relief, really, because it's not as if you're thinking, oh, well, it'll be all right. But there's a sense of being able to move on, plus that sense of, really close mates. I'm a godfather of two, they're adults now, but two kids from a mate who was in D Squadron.
Yeah.
So, you've got that emotional sort of thing going on. And that system works. You
want to protect them. There's a couple of things, and I just in research for the prep for the podcast, you took solace from someone that I'm not sure whether this was before the event or whatever, but the process that was going through your mind, that they can control whatever they want in my body. They can hurt me, they can flick, but they can't control my mind. Is that the sort of mindset you go into in an environment like that when you're caught up in a situation?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we do to do with this, conduct under capture, what happens is that anybody who's been held against their will, whether it's sort of a prisoner of war, a political hostage, financial hostage, anybody who's been kept against their will, are invited to come to Hereford, which is the headquarters of the Special Air Service in the west of the UK.
Yeah.
And talk about their experiences, then the Q&A. So there was this guy who was a US Marine Corps pilot who was flying Phantoms off aircraft carriers during the Vietnam War. And his tour consisted of 88 sorties, 88 missions.
Yeah.
Once he'd done 88, that was the end of his tour. So he's on his 78th mission and got shot down over Vietnam and landed up as a prisoner of war for 6 years. And over 5 years in solitary confinement, continuously beaten. We just see him physically, got no hair, all sort of lots of porcelain teeth.
Yeah.
He had no muscle mass on his buttocks, because it was just beaten with bamboo off of him, during the time he was there. And what he said that, because he was like a Marine and, US Marine Corps, all that, when he got caught, he was sticking out his chest and getting aggressive. So he said, instead of 2 guards coming in, 4 came in.
Yeah.
So he quickly realized that ain't going to work. So what he said, it's just accepting they've got 100% control of you physically. So why fight it? Try to spend your time minimizing the damage as opposed to, antagonizing them and getting more. But what they haven't got is your mind and your thoughts. And he says that. And so he had 6 years of literally just concentrating on, he built, he doesn't know how to build a house, but he built a house and then painted it and then repainted it. And he done all this sort of stuff. And I used to think about him quite a lot because I was thinking, all right, I'm in an interrogation center. With stricter clothing, always handcuffed and blindfolded, I didn't realize at the time initially, but there was 3 of us in there. And we're getting whipped and, I had my teeth pulled out, I'm getting burnt, all of us. And I used to think of that guy and I thought, well, he had 6 years of it, and I'm on like week 2 or week 3.
Okay,
so far so good.
You took some solace from that. You also had a situation. We'll move on from this shortly, but again, it's just an experience that is rather extraordinary, and having someone that can talk about it. My understanding of it, you were lined up for a mock execution as well, up against the wall,
yes.
facing the wall with the weapons being loaded behind you.
Yeah.
What goes through your mind at that stage?
Well, it's the same thing. Like, fuck it. That was it. I think what was happening, we were, there was a prisoner exchange for Algerian medical staff. Once the war was won, there were 2 prisoner exchanges for Algerian medical staff to come into Baghdad to help the civilians. And the estimate's about 115,000, and it's probably right. There were bodies everywhere.
Yeah.
And so there was an initial prisoner release. Myself and by then American pilots were being brought into Abu Ghraib. We'd been moved to Abu Ghraib prison by then. Obviously, we didn't know it was Abu Ghraib at the time, but now we do. And myself and a guy called Joseph Smalls, a Marine Corps jump jet pilot, were left behind. But the way that, certainly even for air crews and conduct capture happens, is that if you see anybody, you try and make contact within the prison. So when they got to the International Red Cross, they said, well, there's still some guys there, So there was another round of prisoner exchanges for more medical staff. So the second lot, there was there was about 20 of us from different places in the prison. We all got driven to the airfield. You could hear the airfield because you could hear jets, all that sort of stuff going on. Thought, right, well, this is good. Then we got put into a hangar, still handcuffed and blindfolded, and put against the wall, facing the wall. And then we could hear, weapons being cocked. They had AKs, yeah. So you could hear that big, heavy sort of weapon being cocked. It was that, for me, it was just like, that was it. Like, fuck it. Like, so far, but there was different reactions. There was, the guy Joseph Small was standing next to me, and he started praying. I could hear him mumbling and praying, and I thought, okay, well, he's got religion. He's that. There were some guys who started to cry, and very embarrassingly, it wasn't at the time, but afterwards, because we all got out alive. But there was one Brit who started crying and begging, and so Joseph Small just screamed out, shouting at the wall, like, "Shut up!" The last thing I want to hear is some sort of whining, And I spoke to him afterwards, and basically he'd just become a granddad, this guy, and was saying a prayer to this grandchild he'd never seen.
Yeah.
And it was a fair one. So there was an interesting sort of collection, because the Iraqis, they're cocking their weapons, and it was I don't know, felt like probably a minute. It felt longer. But then they just all started laughing because they knew what they were doing, and they knew what they were trying to achieve, and they got it.
It's that mental and physical torture, isn't it? But look, it's an amazing story, and that book, it's left an indelible impression on me when I read it, and we're talking sort of 30 years ago. And there was one, I think at some stage when you were kept at isolation, and I remember, and correct me if my memory's wrong, because I'm delving in 30 years ago, but you were put into a courtyard area or whatever and just felt some sun on your face, and all of a sudden and I've held on to that for a long time. Not that I look in that sort of situation, but it was really interesting to me that in the worst possible scenario, you can get some energy back just from a little bit of sunlight or joy. Is that am I remembering it properly?
No, you absolutely are. It was like crazy, because I wasn't expecting it to happen. I got pulled out of the cell. This is after the very first prisoner exchange. So I got pulled out of the cell, and I got taken into a yard that I'd never seen before. And it was a bucket and a packet of soap powder. And this is when I knew that things were going well, because they wanted me to wash my face and my hair in soap powder in this bucket. Which I did. It's fine. It didn't work anyway. You got one little bucket of water, and all this soap powder. But it was actually being out in the sun and getting some warmth. And it must be a sort of primeval sort of thing, really, just to get those sun rays. Because by then it'd been about 6 or 7 weeks, and it really did. It sort of lightened the mood. Number one, because I knew there was movement, because they wanted to clean my face up. So I knew that was a positive thing. But actually, to be out in the sun as well, just to feel the warmth was great.
Well, I've carried that with me for a long time. So that's the impression that your book has. That you can find a little bit of sunlight in that darkness. Look, we'll move on. But you got released after 6 weeks. You've suffered some nerve damage and dislocated shoulder, kidney and liver damage, hepatitis B. So they did a job on you in there.
They did. I think. Well, certainly during the when we was in the interrogation centre. Again, they continuously wanted to know what we were doing. In Abu Ghraib, there wasn't sort of organised interrogations and torture, but by then the air war had started, then the ground war had started. So the air war was literally 20 minutes after last light, the bombing would start, and 20 minutes before first light, the bombing would stop. So, they're taking casualties. We're taking ordnance in the prison.
Yeah.
Civilians are getting killed. So there was a lot of frustrations, So the Iraqis are coming in, taking out their frustrations, whether their mates have been killed or their families been killed. And again, the lad who was next to us, Joseph Small, they broke his leg. They just given him a good old beating. His leg was broken at the end of it.
Yeah.
So there was lots of that. And at one stage, the reason why I reckon I got hepatitis is that I had to lick my own faeces off my arm.
Yeah.
Because the legs, they thought it was funny.
Right.
And it was the question of, well, do you do that, or do they have a go with you with the sticks again? So I think we just do it. Just do it.
It's amazing, and I don't think anyone. But thanks for taking us through that part of your life experience, because most people don't get to survive that type of experience, and also have the benefit of someone like yourself being able to articulate what you went through. Let's wind it back a little bit. Your childhood is fascinating in itself for a variety of reasons, but you were abandoned at birth.
Yeah, which I didn't know the word for it until about 10 years ago. I was what's called a foundling. So basically, my mother had had me, but left me at the A&E department, the emergency department of the hospital. And an ambulance came in, so the ambulance driver and the crew saw me in a carrier bag and took me in. And then I was in care until sort of about five and a bit, and then done a period of fostering, and then was eventually adopted. And what people expect it to be was a big traumatic experience. I quite liked it. The bit I can, the little I can remember in the home, I quite liked. I thought it was like fun. So there was loads of other kids and things, all that sort of stuff. And when I went through fostering and eventually adopted, there was another kid who was older than me, but from the same home, who was adopted. It was the cleaner. Actually, it was the cleaner from the home. This is how mad it was. They used to, so this woman who was the cleaner used to go, "Oh, well, I'll take one of them home for the weekend."
Yeah,
you imagine that now.
It's crazy when you think about it.
Yeah, the older kid used to go for the weekend, and then I went for the weekend. So because they fostered him, then they adopted him, I thought that was how it worked. Do you know what I mean? I thought that's how you sort of. It was no big problem at all.
I suppose if you don't know any different, you think that's what everyone goes through. You got
no, exactly.
You say you had some good experiences with the foster families that you had some time with? Yeah. I thought it was all good fun. Actually, I really enjoyed it, and I even in the home I enjoyed it. Again, I was really young. I didn't really get much of it until, but I've got bits and pieces, and everything was good. And just seemed this natural thing to then you land up with the cleaner.
and this other lad, who's now your brother, sort of thing. I thought it was great.
Okay, always look on the bright side of life. You got yourself into trouble, and don't feel ashamed. On I Catch Killers, we've had plenty of people that have gone down this path, let me tell you. But some petty crimes, running a bit wild, you end up in a detention home as a child?
Yeah, I landed up in the UK, what was called the Borstal system, which was at the time the government was going to deal with this thing that was called juvenile delinquency. So the world was all going to pot. The government said, right, what we're going to do, we're going to deal with these juvenile delinquents. And there was a thing called the short, sharp shock. And the idea, you went into these Borstals, there's no education or rehabilitation or nothing like that. Basically, it was just like a harsh regime with the idea that you'll be so scared you won't reoffend, which was absolute rubbish. The thing was abandoned within sort of 7 or 8 years, because
probably did more damage than good.
Absolutely, absolutely, it was absolute chaos, and that's how I landed up in the army, because there was a lot of groups that are lobbying. Again, I didn't know. Like, what do I know? I'm 16, but there was a lot of groups at that time lobbying government to say, look, this isn't working. There's got to be some social mobility. You've got to get in. We've got to do something for these 16, 17-year-old kids, because all we're going to do is get out, go back where they come from, and reoffend. So one of the groups that were coming in was the army, and the idea was, if you got accepted by the army, you didn't go back to Borstal. So we all sort of we all got told we're going to be helicopter pilots, because that's what the film was that we saw. And then you go away for 3 days. So they take you away. The army take you away for 3 days out of Borstal, and you do different tests, academic tests, physical tests, all that, to see if they're going to accept you. And again, very clear, none of us are going to be flying helicopters. So the ones that passed the medicals and the rest of it got offered places in the infantry. So I got offered a place in a light infantry regiment called the Green Jackets. And I weren't really listening to what was going on during this 3 days, because I just wanted to get out of Borstal. So it sounded like a football team to me. And I went, yeah, I'll do that. Because the deal was, then you went back to your what are called gatekeepers, because obviously loads of kids didn't have parents, so they're called gatekeepers. So you went back to gatekeepers, and they would sign a contract, I presume, with the police, that they're going to keep grips of you.
Yeah.
Until you got your reporting date. And that's how I landed up as what we call an infantry junior leader in 16, nearly 17 years old.
Okay, well, that would have given you, I suppose, with the life that you've had, given you some structure. Did it feel like the right fit for you when you went into the military?
Do you know what? No. For the first sort of 3 months, I hated it. First of all, I had to shave every day, and I didn't have to shave till I was about 19.
Yeah.
And I was full of acne, so I'm there, chopping off the tops of these zits every morning, thinking, what am I doing? I know. And and also, if you joined at 16, what you do when you was at this infantry junior leaders battalion, instead of the 6 months training, you got a year's training as an infantry soldier.
Yeah.
So the minimum engagement at that time was 3 years. And again, when I went to the 3 day selection, again, I weren't really listening, because all I wanted to do was get out of Borstal. So then I realised I was committed for 6 years, because they want to get their money's worth out for training you for a whole year. So, I think, right, the army's ripping me off now. And it took, really, for me, it was the about 3 months in, doing all the things that infantry soldiers do, all the assault courses and the marching and all that stuff. And then we got marched to the Army Education Centre, and it really did change my life there, because the guy, the educator who came in, for us, like 16, 17-year-old soldiers, was the world's oldest soldier. Now I know he was 40, but to us at that time, he was like the world's oldest soldier. And he sort of changed our lives, because he said, the reason you're all here is because everybody thinks you're thick, but you're not thick, you're just uneducated. So he says, the only reason you lot, can't read and write is because you don't read and write. So it all starts today. And it was then, only because he told me, or us in the classroom, that the reason we were in this infantry junior leaders battalion was that we all had the numeracy and literacy of between a 9 and an 11-year-old. And in UK education sort of parlance now, that's known as Key Stage 2.
Yeah.
So we're all sort of got reading and writing abilities of primary school kids.
And that and it did change your life, and that's something I want to talk about later on, about your work with literacy and the importance of it.
Yeah.
But, that sort of inspired you to start learning and reading, and look at you now. You're a well-renowned author.
No, it's mad.
You didn't picture that at that stage, I would imagine.
No, absolutely not. No.
No,
absolutely not.
As a 19-year-old, you found yourself deployed over to Northern Ireland, and people, over here in Australia, we mightn't have a full appreciation of, that place and time. But that was a pretty heavy situation with the conflict that was going on there.
It was full on. It was quite interesting. It's in 1 year alone, 147 soldiers got killed.
Yeah.
If you're looking on year statistics, more soldiers, more Brits got killed in Northern Ireland than Afghanistan. It's a really weird, but because the war went on for so long, it sort of lost its out of consciousness. Yeah. So there used to be a thing on the news, literally the last thing in the news. Last night, another soldier, and then that was it. Another soldier got killed or whatever, because it had gone on for so long. But for sort of the battalions, it was like a constant thing that was going on. So I first went literally on my 18th birthday, because the year before there was something like about 8 17-year-old soldiers were killed. So then they said, right, you've got to be 18 to go on operation. So that all changed. So on my 18th birthday, I went, and then literally done for 4 years. Every year for the next 4 years, done between a sort of 4 to 4.5 months tour every year.
It seems like so much responsibility for a kid that age, doesn't it? 18, and no,
it's all mad. It's all mad. But interesting, the infantry. But the infantry is so young anyway. There's that whole statistic. Vietnam War, average age 19. Nothing much changed. If you can look at sort of the average age, say, of an infantry guy, who's joined up, 19, 20-year-old. So all of a sudden you're there. You're up to your chin in Kevlar with a 7.62 rifle, and off you go. So there's a sense of excitement.
Yeah.
Because you're doing the very thing, all that macho stuff. Sense of excitement. Sometimes in the in contacts, it is exciting because there's still a sense of safety. Because if they're a big contact, I remember when I was 18, we was in a place called Crossmaglen, which was on the border, and we were put a cordon around a housing estate. So we had machine guns on the top of the buildings on the housing estate. So people, the provisional IRA were coming in from the border and started to attack the soldiers that were doing the cordon. And so what happened, it was like the whole night just lit up, with all the machine guns going and everything. And because you're in the cordon there and feel secure, that's quite exciting. It's when it's certainly on the next tour where I had a contact where I'll come across an ambush by the provisional IRA that was being set up on the edge of a town called Keady. And we had a very close contact, just in meters of each other. That's when it's not sort of exciting, because you think, where am I going?
When it brought it home. Is that the time you were sort of 19, the first time you shot someone? Is that the...
Exactly, yeah. It's the first time I shot somebody and killed somebody. So I killed one and wounded two.
Yeah.
And, there was no great... in the films, there's all these actions going on. It's just what's called a cabbie. And I don't know why it's called a cabbie. It's just called a big cabbie. You just get the rounds down towards them, and they're doing exactly the same, because they're just as nervous and scared. So you just get the rounds down between you and see what happens at the end of it, really.
See who's standing.
Yeah. And so, it's supposed to be all these, actions and all. It's not, when it's so close, you just get the rounds down and see what happens.
Well, I think Mike Tyson, the boxer, said the best plans for stepping inside the boxing ring go out the door when you're punched in the face. And it's very similar in the firefight, I would imagine.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah.
Hey, Andy, we might wrap up part one at this stage. If that's okay. And there's a lot I want to cover on for the next part. So when we get back, I want to talk to you in depth about your latest novel, The Rescue. Yep. I'm also, if you don't mind, touch on the fact that you've been diagnosed with as a psychopath, because I think that's quite interesting. And you actually wrote a book about that. And let's talk about the work that you're doing with literacy and in prisons, because that's very much what we're aligned to here on I Catch Killers, about how you can fight crime, making a difference. And quite often the answer's very simple. So we'll take a break and we'll be back shortly.